that the spectrum is not, what's the word, infinite?
No, it's finite.
It's finite. So it means it can
it's like 1 to 20.
And so you cannot keep you know what you've been given and say that I'm not going to pay for it. So you have to pay for it.
So I think the responsibility is both ways. You need to be responsible and engage with the NCA. But the NCA too has to be a little bit more fair and reasonable in
that is why I spoke about the pecuniary penalties. So, the core issue is to look at what we have on the ground and see how we can all come together and not curtail that service provisioning in terms of access to information or information delivery. The practice of journalism, the practice of having a media entity to release information to the people and, you know, entrench this socioeconomic development through democracy should... it's a fundamental right.
Yes. So, John, let me just take us back to a few things that Harry mentioned. You asked why has a regulator waited for so long, and Tanko also mentioned the fact that there should be engagement. Right. Yes, I think that the NCA has really adopted or used what we call the soft touch regulatory approach. If we go back and we really look at the engagements that we've had with the various FM stations, those defaulting, you can tell that the NCA has been engaging them in some cases for over 10 years to ensure that they do the right thing. But this engagement did not yield any results. And apart from that, the NCA has what we call the human face. We've had engagements with GIBA, we've had engagements with the community radio stations, and what we always seek to do is to ensure that people are complying. But to what extent or how long can the NCA sit down and wait for people to keep on defaulting? You talked about penalties. I'd like to say that penalties are also meant to be a deterrent. So if you get a license or an authorization for the NCA, you have a responsibility to read the conditions of your authorizations or your license and know that within this industry that I'm entering into, these are the things that I'm likely to face if I don't meet the conditions that have been given to me. In 2017, the NCA was hauled before the Public Accounts Committee. Why? Because when the external auditors came to audit the books of the NCA, they realized that a certain service that we give authorizations to, some members or some people who have that authorization had failed to pay their annual regulatory fees, and the NCA had sat down for so long, and then the state was losing money. Absolutely. And so NCA was hauled before the Public Accounts Committee. Do we go on doing the same thing year in and then year out? I think no. And for the authorization holders and license holders, I think that you have a responsibility to all Ghanaians through the NCA for holding that public spectrum that you are using for your broadcasting service. Once you have come for authorization for the NCA, you are using a spectrum that belongs to Ghana. And the benefits of that spectrum is for Ghanaians. So you should not sit down and wait for somebody to remind you that it is time for you to be able to renew.
I mean, someone made an analogy that's just like using the road, which is tolled. You will pay the toll before you use the road.
You will pay the toll.
You cannot say that I'm not going to pay the toll, and every day you go through.
But you know the difficulty when it comes to radio and television, it's because of one of the key fundamental human rights, the freedom of expression, freedom of speech. It is linked to this, and therefore, when you are dealing with radio and television, it becomes extremely difficult for you to look at it in isolation. But I agree what you're saying. The responsibility is both ways. What I am saying is that I think that we need to, frankly, I think we all went to sleep at the time when the penalty, the amount of the penalty was being put in, because you need to look at Chapter 12. And actually, when you look at the Electronic Communications Act, I think section, I don't know whether it's section 9 or so, it says that in pursuant of its mandate, the authority shall pay particular attention to the provisions of Chapter 12 of the Constitution.
Right, that's right.
And it didn't say that for saying sake. It's saying that because it knows that in Chapter 12, that is where the media has been given that unique freedom. And independent. So I'm saying that we all went to sleep when those penalties was being pushed out, and we didn't challenge, because there's no point putting in an amount, because if you look at our media landscape in Ghana, yes, people would say they are commercial, but you know that when you look at the media landscape and the amount of money they make and all those things, it is really a big challenge. So when you put in a penalty there, that more or less is going to be even impossible for the people to achieve. It's more or less like you are just ambushing people and wanting them to fail. But I think we went to sleep. At the time they came with that, Gilbert and others should probably have challenged that and said it is an indirect way of achieving the very things that the Constitution in chapter 12 says we should do. But be that as it may, we all went to sleep. Now it is in the law. But again, it is an act, it is a regulation. We have the mother of all laws, which is the Constitution. And so you need to be very careful when you are dealing with it. But I understand the peculiar situation NCA is, and I understand the difficulty of the authorization holders. That's why I'm saying that the dialogue has to be continuous, and it has to be done in an environment of respect and goodwill. But the way things are going now is like a headmaster and the people, and I think that is no good.
Are you saying the NCA
is acting like
are you saying they've thrown away the Constitution? You talked about, is it?
I think they're doing it because it is not grounded outside the law. I mean, they are coming under an act, they are coming under a regulation. But I'm saying that there is a superior in terms of the hierarchy. There is a superior, which is the Constitution, and it has reminded you that whatever you're doing, you should pay particular attention to chapter 12. So that's why I'm saying that that is why it is very, very, very important that when NCA is taking decisions in relation to radio and television, it is not like any other decision at all. You cannot do that without looking at what the provisions in chapter 12.
Exactly.
We have quite a lot to talk about. So
no, the NCA did not go to sleep because the NCA has been in continuous engagement with its authorizations holders. We know what Chapter 12 talks about in the Constitution, and because of that, the NCA extended the rope and extended the rope. So the NCA did not go to sleep. But the spectrum, as we mentioned earlier, is finite. How do you get the spectrum, and why do you not make use of the spectrum so that everybody benefits from the spectrum? And we should know that when we come for the spectrum, and it's stated in the electronic communications regulations, that there's a duration period for which you have the authorization.
Yeah. You're right.
All right. One thing I also want to talk about is content, because it's one of the biggest worries for broadcasting in this country. The fact that piracy is rife, the substandard content that we have, the lack of content development. Content is tied to the authorization of these, because I know for a fact that when people go to defend why they want, they are asked to provide what kind of content they're going to show or going to use on their channels. Why do we have a problem with content? And I don't know if the NCA is the right place to talk about content, but the NCA seems to be very silent on the content that these people you've authorized give to the Ghanaian people.
Okay, just to make things very, very clear for us, the NCA has no role whatsoever when it comes to regulations.
Okay, we just want to know
content,
that.
yes.
We want to know
that goes to the National Media Commission.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so thankfully Prince Harry is on the National Media Commission. What's happening when it comes to content?
There's a lot happening. We have a lot of policies and regulations that the National Media Commission has put out. We also know that in the digital era, there is a lot to do with content, more than spectrum. And so the National Media Commission, I believe, is doing a lot of work to look into what digitalization presents and how to protect content, how to churn out new contents, how to regulate content provisioning across the media landscape.
So you do appreciate the fact that content is a problem in this country, and the kind of content that we put out there on both television and radio to some extent gives the wrong signals to Ghanaians in terms of even the information that people get, the education we give people, because we are not putting out the right content.
Well, we have content regulations and policies that guide all of this. It is a fact that you would find some contents that are not appealing to discerning minds, and you would find contents that are way above expectation. And so the issues borders on what we have already started with, which has to do with the broadcasting bill. That is something that we have to get back to, because all of these are well catered for in the broadcasting bill. But like I said, there's been a lot of work that an NMC has been doing in terms of monitoring the media in terms of television and radio and what contents they channel. I know in recent times we've had some complaints coming to the Complaint Settlement Committee to look into certain, contents that are obscene, especially when you look at late night programming and programming that have sexually explicit contents and stuff like that. So it is something being worked on, and they have been working assiduously to ensure that people abide by, the regulations. Recently, regulations on religious broadcasting was also, published, and so there's a lot of work being done in that area.
Jyoti, remember when the National Media Commission tried to take the concerns of the public on board, and they tried to do something about content, but they couched that particular, I don't remember, was it a bill or something? They couched it in a way that said that there was going to be a fine. And the use of the language fine is a criminal, if you like, it has a criminal connotation. And that's why it went to court, and then the Supreme Court says, no, you can't do that, because of the very things we talked about earlier on about the unique position of the media. So when you are going to regulate content, you need to do it in a way that does not seem to appear as if you want to more or less like control what goes into the media. But there's a lot of concern out there, and as you rightly pointed out, I think the broadcasting bill will deal with some of these issues, and that's why the delay is really a tragedy, because the longer we delay putting this in out there, the more damage we are causing to ourselves. As you rightly pointed out, there are a lot of content out there that really it's not in the best.
Especially with the advent of new media, the NMC is looking into ways we can regulate, wholesomely, because if you consider OTT services, which has to do with programming which may not directly be coming from within Ghana. Right. For example, Netflix, iFlix, Showmax, and the rest. You need to see how you can even extend your arms in regulating contents coming from that end. You also want to look at social media. You want to look at what internet protocol television provides. You want to look at online radio, journalism as a core, and fact-finding and all of this. It's a daunting task, but the NMC has begun to look into expanding beyond just the linear and traditional broadcasting, which is radio or television, within our terrestrial spheres.
We do hope that something is done quickly about that. But let me ask Nana Difia this one. Are you aware of unauthorized, for example, television channels broadcasting in Ghana? And if you are, why are they on air?
Unauthorized television channels?
Yes.
Yes, the NCA is always, we have what we call the, we have a new monitoring tool, the broadcast monitoring system, and which is always scanning the airwaves to see who is broadcasting on which FM channel or which television. Yes. We think within the last 2 or so years, the NCA has done some shutdowns with regards to television. So when the NCA is aware, we go down and then we effect the shutdown of whichever station that is operating without the authorization. And this is not only television, it also goes to radio. It's a continuous thing that the NCA does. And it makes, I should just talk about our regional offices, and that the NCA has offices within all the regions of Ghana now. So this even makes our monitoring easier, because we have engineers and tools within the various regional offices that are also continuously doing the monitoring. So these are unauthorized stations, when they come up to the attention of the NCA, are always shut down.
Yeah. But Jyoti, isn't it the case that for those who are operating television stations without any authorizations at all, the way you deal with them, it's totally different from those who have acquired the authorization and probably they have failed to renew it. And so for TV stations like that who have no authorization at all, I think it is understandable that you would go in there and then say, no, you can't do this. But for those who have the authorizations and it hasn't been renewed, I think this is where the concerns are in terms of how you engage with those particular
I'm a bit worried, because it looks to me from what Nana is saying that the NCA is maybe not fully aware that there are some unauthorized...
No, you see, the way the dynamics, the landscape has changed. People can just stand up and do these things, and the NCA has to be up to
that every year. The NCA does, for example, what the Ghana Medical Association does. So these are the FM and TV stations in good standing. Publish it.
This information is available on the NCA website.
Why don't you publish it in the graphic?
It is regularly updated, and this is a lot of information. We have over 136 authorized.
If you just take a full page of graphic and say these are in full.
It is on the NCA website.
Let me come
together with the radio stations. It shows where the radio station is authorized to operate. It gives all the details there. So it is regularly updated on the NCA website.
There is even a paradigm shift in the way things are now with regards to digitalization and digital migration. When you want to focus on the role NCA plays in terms of authorizing or clamping down on unauthorized, in quotes, you have to look at a lot of parameters. One of them has to do with the fact that we have authorizations given to entities to run a number of channels, which is called bouquet.
Right.
Okay. So if you are looking just at the television screens and finding a number of channels and wondering where these channels came from, you should also begin to look at the other side, whether these channels belong to a bouquet operator, where that bouquet operator has a license or authorization from the NCA. And we have free-to-air satellite bouquet authorization holders. We have free-to-air pay TV bouquet holders like GoTV. We have those who are also doing OTT services. You have to look at the whole landscape and be sure where these unauthorized ones.
But you see, the only thing is that even if you have a bouquet and you want to maybe outsource some to someone, you still need the authorization.
No,
you need to write to that, please notify.
Of course you have to notify the number of channels you have.
You have to notify the authority.
Of course.
Because it is in the electronic communications.
But these individual channels do not require direct authorization.
Isn't it possible that, for example, I know Prince Harry, he has a bouquet. Isn't it possible that I can go to him and say, hey, I have this channel I want, can you put it in the bouquet? And by that, I will be bypassing the NCA because he will agree to take my channel and put it in his bouquet, and I would not be paying anything to the NCA.
So when he is coming for authorization from the NCA, he would have stated the number of channels he would be using. And so when we notice that he is doing more than the authorization requires, the NCA will get in touch with him.
Actually, the authorization does not limit you. So you only have to keep updating.
You have to keep updating
you have to
the
keep
NCA.
Updating. If you are going from 80 to 150 to 200, keep updating the NCA. But it does not limit you to say you have only this number of
I think I now understand why we have
now
the dynamics has changed.
That's what I mean. The dynamics have changed.
Yeah, you just have to, NCA will just have to be a bit more sophisticated today, in the way they engage with this.
Even today, our current DTT platform has about 40 plus channels.
Yes.
Now, these 40 plus channels are not having authorization in the digital terrain from the NCA. The NCA issues authorization to the BSD, the broadcast signal distributor. So today, all the channels you find in digital who are broadcasting as you see it are not necessarily getting a license or authorization from the NCA.
Is that correct? Should that be the case?
There is rather a different relationship in that regard, and that has to do with logical channel numbering. That is why you would see channel 1 belonging to GTV and channel 7 belonging to Crystal TV Prime. These are the logical channel numbers that still bind the TV stations to the NCA. Other than that, the allocation of spectrum and the spectrum dividend that the digitalization brings to us rather says the relationship between the BSD and the NCA. And this is what the dynamics of digital. All
right, let me take some of these messages coming to us. We have very little time. Time is gone already. I think the TV and radio stations are too much for a small country like Ghana, and the authorities need to do something about it. This is Ralph from Kumasi. If authorities don't work, we say they are sleeping on the job. If they do, we say they are too harsh. Why is the media different from other organizations? You use our resources and you don't want to pay. Why? We have to be serious as a nation for once. The number of radio and TV stations are just too many. To continue issuing licenses to any applicant, authorization, we've been corrected, without a ceiling doesn't hold water. We are approaching the rainy season, and all we hear and see are cheap songs and dances. How many stations are giving priority to agriculture, which sustains this country? Does the NMC really check content the media give the public, especially for radio and TV? The language and the exaggerations by especially most of the account-speaking radio stations regarding news reading. Some of them also stoke political tensions in the country. Kofi Amwa from Tema centers this. Freedom of expression must not be abused. Our problem continues to fester because relevant regulators don't grab the whip early enough to deter defaulters. From Gordon in Kaswa, some of the messages coming to us. Ladies and gentlemen, we have about 3-4 minutes to go. I'm going to give everybody 1 minute each to talk about what is close to their hearts in terms of the discussion today. Mr. Tanko.
Yeah, what is close to my heart? I know we're all aware of this issue about is it shutdown or what it is, of some radio stations. And yeah, if you look at the law that the NCA wants to use to shut them down, this is lawful. But as I said earlier on, whatever the NCA has to do would have to be done within the context of what is stated in Chapter 12 of the Constitution. And the law that the NCA is trying to use is a subordinate law, which is an act and a regulation. But of course, the freedom of expression that is guaranteed in Chapter 12 is not absolute, is qualified. Now, if you're going to use a lawful means to achieve something, it has to be the case that whatever you want to achieve, you are using it to achieve a legitimate aim. We know that it's an open secret that is stated out there that in terms of our licensing or authorization regime, it is not open, it is not transparent. And therefore, when the NCA wants to take these actions, you can't take certain action out of context. You need to look at the context within which you are taking this action. And especially this thing that they did. When you look at the radio station in question, which is Radio Gold and XYZ, it is an open secret that they are pro the opposition. Now, when you look at what is happening... I
tried very hard not to go there today.
But it is very important because you said you wanted to talk about it. No, and what I'm saying is that...
But your minute is up.
Yeah, just let me wrap up. When you look at the fact that we're coming at the background of Ghana's ranking in terms of the media freedom has gone down, the killing of Ahmed Swale, the issue about Anas going into exile, the issue of government sending media house to the national regulator. When you look at all these contexts, you would say that, yes, you have the law there, but you need to look at it in a more humane and policy-related way to avoid these very tensions that we are seeing.
All right, Prince Zahari.
Well, to foster and deepen the reasons why we liberalize the airwaves, I would rather want us to look at the core issues, which are the fundamentals. She mentioned that the pecuniary penalties are supposed to be punitive and deterrent enough. But like he mentioned, as enshrined in the 1992 Constitution, the freedom of the media is guaranteed. And the role the media plays, like I have captured earlier, is extremely important that we do not curtail that role they play. So the practice of journalism, the practice of information delivery is not curtailed. Now, it is also given an onus to both parties to be responsible and ensure that when you are supposed to do the right things are done. We know we have the laws, but we have to call for a national relook at the laws. In the current times in which we are, the Electronic Communications Act is talking about broadcast for mass communication with the use of spectrum. But in today's time, are we really requiring the spectrum for broadcast? Because we have online media.
True, we've moved away.
We've moved away from that. So we are actually not paying attention to time, place, and circumstances. Circumstances in the fact that now we have multiplicity of media platforms. We have user-generated contents that are available on the fly. And so we have to begin to look at the core issues of the law. The laws are there, but let's see how we can re-amend so it suits today's time, the realities of today. You also want to look at the pecuniary penalties. It shouldn't be a sledgehammer on a mosquito. It shouldn't be a death penalty. So closing down radio stations is not the way to go. I would have given even a fuller percentage, more than 100%, to the current administration for the reforms they are doing, because it's in the right direction. I mean, creeping everybody back in line and making sure we adhere to what has been stipulated in the law. But in doing so, you don't cut the information flow, because 25 years on, since 1994, in fact, there was even a debate during the era of formulating these regulations whether there should be expiration of authorization.
Yeah.
Why should there be a 5-year expiration of authorization? Exactly.
Yeah.
And at the time, the reasons that were given sounded well, I mean, to all of us. But in today's time, the reasons that were given at the time were having to do with we are entering a new field, and for the fact that it could have an effect on national security, we are just liberalizing the airwaves and all of that. Now, moving on, we have a case study. And 25 years on, it has been positively impacted on the nation than negative. Okay. And so in clamping down on radio stations, I don't think the solution is closing them down. But let me use this opportunity.
Your time is up.
Let me use this opportunity to make a passionate appeal to the NCA, to the leadership of the NCA, to the president of the nation,
to relook at
this, and
thank you very much. Okay, I think my last words will just be a few points. I want to remind viewers and players within the communications industry that the NCA is bound by extensive legal framework. We don't do anything just because we want to do it and all that. There are laws, there are regulations that guide the way we operate, so we don't just act in a vacuum. That aside, the NCA always ensures that it is engaging with the people continuously. If Prince Harry will remember, we've had workshops where we have met with the operators within the industry to try and come up with new ways to regulate so that we get the benefit of using the spectrum for all stakeholders, consumers, listeners, and all that. And then the shutdowns, as Tanko mentioned, since we started the audits, we've shut down over 35 stations, and this is across Ghana. These are from Cape Coast, from Takrady, from Masankrikwa, all over. So it is not restricted only to certain stations within a particular regional. Well, this is my time to speak.
I'm being told that my time.
And the last thing I'd like to say is that we wish to appeal to all those who play within the industry to ensure compliance. Although we engage with them, it is very necessary for everybody to comply with the authorizations and licenses they are given.
All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being on the show. I've had Mr. Prince Harry Crystal, Executive Council Member Giba, Member of the National Media Commission and Director of Operations Crystal TV. I've had Nana Dufie Bedu, Director Consumer and Corporate Affairs, National Communications Authority, and Mr. Zakaria Tanko Musa is a lawyer and a lecturer at the Ghana Institute of Journalism. You know something, I think for all of us, the broadcasting industry has done quite a lot of good for this country. The proliferation opened up information and education and entertainment. But we also, as media people, we have to be responsible. We must not abuse the trust that has been given to us. We need to do the right things. As much as we sometimes sympathize with those who have been affected by the NCA rules and regulations, we also have to caution all media houses that it is important that we follow through. And I think Giba will agree with me that it's important that we follow through what the law says. Yes, freedom of the media is guaranteed, but it doesn't mean it should be abused. My name is J.O. Tiajo, and this is Talking Point.